Shabbat Shalom. There's a little curiosity that I noticed this week in thinking, reflecting on Hanukkah. We talked a little bit last night about the discrepancy between the sort of force, militarism that you get in the book of Maccabees, juxtaposed with the Talmud 650 years later, talking about publicizing the miracle, but they don't play in the realm of force. They do talk about bad times for the community and what one does with one's Chanukiah if it's not a good time for the community, but they don't talk about using force in the middle of it. It's an interesting thing. And so where we wound up with was a place of talking about that there is publicizing the miracle both out in the public square, but also l'dor vador, publicizing it and passing it to future generations. That is another way of putting the miracle out there. So there's an interesting thing that I got stuck on this week. Page 261 in Eitz Chaim. We have this whole thing where Joseph, if you were reading along, becomes the vizier, I think is the way that it translates, Joseph's high office in Egypt. And then his brothers come to him, the same brothers who sold him off. They were going to kill him. They sold him into slavery. He winds up down in Egypt. And then years and years later, after Joseph attains his high office in Egypt, they come wandering down in the place of a famine. They don't have enough to eat or drink. And so they come in to talk to this advisor, and Joseph realizes who they are, but they don't realize who Joseph is. Okay? Just making sure we're all on the same page here. On 260, verse 18, it says, "On the third day Joseph said, 'Do this, and you shall live. If you are honest, let one of your brothers be held in place of detention, while the rest of you go and take some rations for your starving households. But you have to bring me your youngest brother, that your words may be verified, and you may not die.' They did accordingly, and they said to each other," this is Joseph's brothers now saying to each other, "Alas, we are being punished on account of our brother, because we looked at his anguish, yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. That's why distress has come upon us." Then Reuben spoke up and said to them, "Did I not tell you, do no wrong to the boy, but you paid no heed? Now comes the reckoning for his blood." Okay, the brothers seem to have this idea that it's coming home to roost. Now for the thing that really struck me, the curiosity that I saw with this. "They did not know Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. He turned away from them and wept." So you're telling me, Torah, Joseph didn't understand his own native tongue without an interpreter? Josh Sachs says no. He's not the only one who says no. There are a number of different rabbis, the way that they play with that. First, there are some medieval rabbis, a couple of them, who say, yeah, Joseph had been gone so long he did not understand his native tongue. Another take on it was that he understood his native tongue, but he needed the interpreter to be there as part of his subterfuge. They couldn't look on and see that he understood, so he needed to have that person there, etc., etc. It's interesting to me that they needed this melitz. It helps with the literary quality of the story. Sure, that Joseph knows and they don't know, and it builds the suspense in all kinds of amazing ways. But what if we take that idea from some of those medieval rabbis, the Mefarshim, who were playing with this, and said that Joseph actually didn't understand their speech any longer. He actually became a stranger to his own childhood language. Entertaining that for just a moment. It kind of defies the imagination on some level, but at the same time, I think there is a certain quality to that which really reverberated with me. This idea that Joseph might have understood the words as they came out of the mouths of the brothers, but he wasn't the same person he was back then. He needed an interpreter, not necessarily to mediate the actual spoken words translating, but this person was on some level mediating to him what this meant from his brothers. Imagine, as Mephorash says, that wasn't Joseph's interpreter, that was Joseph's therapist. That Joseph needed somebody to dwell with him in that space, to internalize and to bring in, and to turn and to return to some of what he was as a child, and couldn't fully show up as the adult that he was, nor could he fully revert to his childhood self and just exact revenge, but actually the interpreter was there to help him mediate this set of events between who he is as an adult and who he is as a child. And now to Hanukkah. And this is where it looped into Hanukkah to me. I think the Hanukkah after the war began on October 7th was a grim one to me. There are a lot of times that I have thought back on the Hanukkah story and I have thought about the zealous caliber of the Hasmoneans, of the Maccabees, and not really related to it. Thought, these people who are out there to kill other Jews for being assimilationists. I sort of struggled with that. But after October 7th, I really felt like, I felt that Hasmonean impulse within me of that fire, that call to arms, that force. And this Hanukkah, I feel something a little bit different. And I think it's refracted through, San Francisco Hillel, the attack at 770 Crown Heights, and the attack on the subway in New York, incidents here and there which didn't even make the news, and then the attacks at Bondi Beach in Australia in the midst of Hanukkah. And I was thinking about what it means to publicize the miracle in a time of attack or violence. Talmud says, you turn it inside of your home in that time of violence. Take your Chanukiah, your menorah that you would have stuck in the window to show to the whole public square, and you sort of bring it inside for matters of safety. I suggested yesterday that one isn't totally refraining from publicizing the miracle when one does that in a bad time, because you're still publicizing it to the small ones in your household, the dor vador. You are shining that light not out into the public square in 3 dimensions, but forward in time. And what I want to add to that today is I think that there are times in which it behooves us to have our own interpreters to help us turn and to return to the Hanukkah of when we were kids. Do you remember what Hanukkah was like when you were a little kid? I see a handful of heads nodding. Maybe you don't. No, I see more heads nodding now. It seems that you do. There's something magical about that quality of all of those candles, all of those lights, and maybe some grown-up helping guide your hand to do it one candle at a time when you finally got old enough. Something magical about that. My Chanukiot growing up, we didn't stick them in the window. I don't know that my family was aware of that. That was the thing you were supposed to do, and let's not light the drapes on fire, and so forth and so on. We just did it around the kitchen table. It's cool. I'll bet many of you did it that way as well. But I just remember the magic of that as a child. And I think this Hanukkah, I felt the furthest removed from that sense of wonderment of the holiday than I ever have. Which is interesting to me, because I spent a few years a little bit further away from it before I had kids, and then having kids becomes this endeavor where you put it on them, and then you get to redo all of that stuff sort of through their eyes, but I still felt really far away. And that was where I happened upon this interpreter. That sometimes, perhaps, we need a little bit of help, not in understanding the words of the bracha, the ritual as it's supposed to be, the order of the candles, how you're concretely supposed to do it. But I think I needed a little bit of help returning to some of that magical quality of it. In the face of violence, in the face of distress, being able to review it And what does Hanukkah mean? Dedication, consecration, to make something sacred, to re-sanctify it again, not just through the eyes of my 8-year-old, but through my own 8-year-old eyes, to turn and to return to that. That was a different kind of Hanukkah for me this year, and it has been. I want to invite you, particularly the more news you consume or read, the more you are up on all of these security paradigms and what have you, don't forget to let Hanukkah have a little bit of its own magic. See if you can find whatever that act of interpretation is, to re-view it, re-sanctify it in the eyes that you had as a little kid, and take back some of that light into this, the darkest time of the year. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.